Story 1. I used to think the best perk of my odd jobs lifestyle was the free travel. Last July, I took a 3-week maintenance contract at Azure Cay Retreat, a luxury eco-resort on a private island off Belize. The deal sounded perfect. Fix things after dark, spend daylight snorkeling and drinking from coconuts. My name is Marcus Reed, 29, journeyman electrician and shameless beach bum, so I signed before reading the fine print. A skiff dropped me at a white pier that shimmered against jungle green. Waiting there was Dr. Ricardo Santoro, the retreat's medical director. Tall, silver-haired, linen shirt. He crushed my hand with surprising strength. Azure Cay isn't just a resort, he said, guiding me past domed villas. Our guests explore guided, lucid dreams. Sleep is the new frontier of wellness. The paycheck kept me grinning. My quarters sat behind the service block near a diesel generator that throbbed like a slow drum. The night shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Duties were ordinary. Unstick doors, swap pool filters. Yet every corridor held glass-walled dream suites where vacationers lay in sleek pods, electrodes on their scalps. They looked less like holidaymakers and more like exhibits. During the day, the resort felt enchanted. Peacocks strutting along shell-white walkways, only shadows melting into darkness. Infinity pools melting into the horizon. Bamboo speakers leaking flute melodies. Guests shuffled between yoga decks and juice bars, convinced they were recharging body and soul, never suspecting their dreams were being tapped like maple sap. Santoro bragged the pods used sub-delta harmonics to polish memory. Brochures called it circadian alchemy. In the staff canteen, the pastry chef joked it actually meant pay, sleep, pay again. We laughed. Yet every afternoon, a pressure gathered behind my eyes, as if some low frequency leaked from the therapy wing and vibrated through the concrete. One sunset, while rewiring path lights, I watched a supply barge unload crates stamped medical. They vanished into a padlocked elevator, absent from any blueprint. The skipper signed the manifest with a shaking hand, eyes fixed on the jungle, as though it might blink. I asked Javier what was inside. Probably gourmet pillow mints, he said, but his grin showed too many teeth. That night, I began keeping a notebook, sketching each wing closure and siren test. The pattern formed a spiral that never repeated. The corridors themselves seemed to crawl whenever we slept. Even the island's wildlife behaved strangely. At dusk, the peacocks froze, necks craned toward the clinic dome, as if listening to a whistle humans could not hear. The image haunted me. On my second night, I met Javier Cruz, stocky guard with a laugh that echoed off tile. He puffed clove cigarettes behind the dumpster. These sleepers creep you out? Think of them as wallets that snore. Javier wore a jade wristband. About a quarter of staff did. It opened management-only doors. Whole wings sealed without warning, red lights replacing green, until, days later, The hallway reopened. The shifting map turned patrols into a maze. My unease grew into jagged dreams. I'd be the one locked in a pod, screaming while someone mopped past. A week in, the sky boiled with an offshore storm, but never rained. I was fixing a shower valve when a low siren rolled through the complex, deeper than a fire alarm. Lights dimmed. Javier jogged up, face pale. 2 nurses sprinted past, jade bands flashing on sensors. We headed for the lobby, but a corridor door refused my push. Lockdown. Wristbands overrode it. Javier searched drawers for a spare. I joined him. Then the power cut for 3 seconds. Emergency lamps flickered blood red. The door beside me unlatched. I stepped through and heard a muffled thud. Turning a corner, I slipped in something slick. A nurse lay crumpled, throat opened by broken mirror glass near her jade band. Bile burned my throat. I grabbed the band and backed away, then heard Javier scream. He knelt, clutching a stomach wound, blood soaking his shirt. Over him stood a barefoot young woman in a resort gown, electrodes dangling, shard in hand. Her eyes blazed not with madness, but fear. "Your maintenance," she rasped. I nodded. "Help me. They'll put me back." Instinct overrode terror. I wrapped a towel around Javier's wound, dragged him into a closet, and faced her again. "Name? Call me Leah," she whispered. "They drugged me during a Vegas eye surgery 3 years ago. They mine nightmares, figure out how to break a mind and sell it." It sounded insane, yet the dead nurse said otherwise. Footsteps pounded. Leah flinched. I stuffed her into my rolling tool cart, burying her beneath towels. The jade band opened doors as we slipped past staff racing toward the siren. The lobby's hurricane shutters were down, but the marina exit still blinked green. Freedom was 2 meters away when Dr. Santoro stepped from shadows, pistol raised. "Return the subject," he ordered. I rammed the cart forward. Leah burst out, slashing. The gunshot missed, shattering a salt lamp. I tackled Santoro. The pistol skidded across stone. Leah grabbed it, but a guard stunned her with a baton. She collapsed. They hauled us to the therapy wing, cuffed, bleeding. They buckled Leah into a pod, the clear lid hissing shut. Santoro turned to me. "Congratulations. You've volunteered as our next guide." A needle bit my neck. Darkness swallowed me. I woke on a fishing boat at dawn, drifting outside the reef. My cuffs were gone. In my pocket lay a note in Leah's frantic hand. "Nightmares travel with water. Warn them." Beside it sat the wristband, chip removed. I called Belizean officials. No one had heard of Azure K. Satellite images showed only jungle where villas had stood. A week later, I flew home, nightmares hitchhiking in my skull. Crimson halls, humming pods, Leah's muffled scream. I scour travel forums nightly for new retreats, promising immersive dream wellness. When I find one, I'll book the first ferry, wire cutters in my duffel, because vacations end, but nightmares migrate. Everyone, eventually, must sleep. Story 2. We'd been saving for our vacation to the Pacific coast for months, my wife, Lena, and I. A chance to escape our brutal city routine. relax in the quiet, foggy towns up the Oregon shoreline. We booked a cozy cabin on a forested cliff just outside a sleepy place called Elk Watch, known mostly for its seafood and solitude. We arrived on a Sunday evening, sun melting into the ocean as sea winds laced through towering pine trees. The place was perfect, untouched nature, wildflowers blooming on the gravel path, and a rustic one-bedroom cabin that smelled faintly of cedar and salt. We hadn't even unpacked when something odd happened. Lena found it first, or rather, him, a cat, or something like one. He was curled beneath the porch steps, nestled between the slats like a shadow stitched into the wood. His fur was a knotted mess of grays and dusty charcoal, with streaks that looked more like old scars than markings. He didn't run when Lena approached. He just blinked at her, once, his round eyes glinting like obsidian stones in the porch light. They were too large for his head, too dark. His pupils didn't adjust. He was scraggly, thin, almost ugly, but in a way that made you want to pick him up and swaddle him. Against better judgment, we did. It felt like one of those whimsical vacation flukes, like the universe had dropped this little guy into our lives for a reason. We named him Drift. We told ourselves he was lucky. That was before things turned strange. The first couple days were uneventful. Drift stuck close to the cabin, curling in corners, watching us with those eerie, glossy eyes. We assumed he was a stray, maybe abandoned by previous guests. Lena doted on him, fed him bits of fish, brushed out his wild coat, but his fur, it grew back too fast. Every time we trimmed knots, new ones appeared the next day. He was growing. Subtly at first, you'd think it was your imagination. A little taller maybe. His legs a bit longer than yesterday. His tail, once a stubby curl, now moved with unsettling fluidity, like it was tasting the air. And he shed constantly, clumps of black hair under the couch behind the toilet, stuck to our pillows. Hair that came in thick, coarse mats. I vacuumed every morning. Still, the tufts returned every night. He didn't meow, not once. He made no sound at all. Even when he moved, it was soundless, except for one game he liked to play. Whenever one of us turned our back, we'd feel it. That prickling heat across the neck. That twitch in your spine that says, something's behind you. You'd whirl around, and Drift would be closer, staring, still, always in some odd posture, perched like a gargoyle on the banister, stretched halfway up a doorframe. Eyes locked on us, pupils so wide, they swallowed the world. He never blinked. At first we joked about it. He's playing red light, green light. Lena would laugh, trying to shake the unease. But the smiles faded after a few nights. We started waking in the middle of the night. Not from dreams, just snapping awake with an electric jolt. Every time, Drift would be sitting at the foot of the bed, head cocked, motionless. Sometimes he'd be in the doorway, or right beside me on the nightstand, inches from my face. I tried locking him out. The doors would be shut, the windows latched. Still, he'd be inside come morning, watching. Then he stopped eating his kibble. He'd sit near the kitchen, eyes following every move. When I'd chop beef or prep chicken, he'd slink closer. His mouth wouldn't open, but the muscles in his throat would twitch, like he was already swallowing. One evening, I dropped a strip of raw steak. Before I could pick it up, Drift lunged. What happened next haunts me. He devoured the meat in 2 jerking gulps, his throat bulging with the effort, like a snake. His jaws clicked in ways that seemed mechanical, too fast. Lena reached for him instinctively, and he snarled. It wasn't a cat's growl. It was guttural, wet. It vibrated in the walls. His fur stood straight, rippling. His limbs twisted outward, contorting. For a moment, we could see his bones bending, resetting. Then he was just still again, purring, nuzzling Lena's ankle like nothing had happened. We made a decision the next morning. We drove him into town to a small animal shelter we passed on the highway. They accepted him without much fuss, though the worker raised an eyebrow at his silence. "Strange little fella," she murmured. "No chip, no tags? You sure he's not feral?" We nodded, drove away. Back at the cabin, we felt an uneasy peace. The air felt lighter. The walls no longer whispered. For the first time in days, we slept. 2 weeks passed. The vacation was nearly over. Then the knocking started. Not at the door, from the attic. We hadn't even known the place had one. The cabin came with no attic hatch, no access ladder. Just a low-beamed ceiling with wooden rafters and exposed nails. And yet, we heard it. Soft, deliberate knocks. 4 in a row, always just before midnight. Then came the meowing. Long, drawn-out cries that scraped against the windows. Sometimes behind the walls, sometimes beneath the floorboards. Always followed by silence. And then, watching. We tried not to look, but we did. One night, driven by foolishness or fear, we opened the bedroom curtain. He was there, perched atop the birdhouse pole by the edge of the cliff. Only it wasn't Drift anymore. Too big, hunched, fur slick and dark like kelp. His limbs were too long, each paw curled over the edge of the platform. His ears had grown spiked tufts, curving like horns. And those eyes, black pits, swallowing starlight, wide enough to drown in. He tilted his head. Not like a cat, like a man. Lena gasped. The porch light flicked off on its own. The shape vanished into the woods. We packed at dawn. Didn't say a word to the owners. We just left the keys in the mailbox and drove. That night, back home, we tried to laugh it off. Vacation stress, an overactive imagination, weird coastal air. Then we heard it, in our apartment hallway, a soft thud, like paws on laminate. Then, that sound, familiar, velvet, meow. We froze, the same low, dragging cry. We opened the door a crack. There, in the middle of the hall, was a single, dark clump of fur, still damp, still warm, waiting. Story 3. I booked the place because the listing promised silence, rolling hills, and a garden of animals. After a year of 12-hour hospital shifts, quiet felt like oxygen. I'm Daniel Mercer, 32, too broke to fly abroad. So when Professor Ellis, an old mentor, offered me a free week at his off-grid retreat in the Welsh borderlands, I stuffed a duffel and left London before dawn. Ellis warned that Terran House was unusual. His late sister spent decades turning the grounds into a self-regulating habitat. I pictured tangled hedges. After 4 hours of switchback lanes, I found orchards bowed with fruit, paths swept clean as museum floors, and half a dozen species grazing together like clockwork. The only person on site was Emrys, a caretaker who met me at the gate, handed over a brass keyring, then roared away on a motorbike. "Back Friday," he called. It was Monday, plenty of time to empty my head. Inside, everything felt paused. Sheets covered furniture, cupboards held jars, and a guest book lay open to a single line. "Let the place guide you." H. Ellis's sister, Helen, had died 10 years earlier. I shook it off, brewed coffee, and explored. Sheep, goats, geese, and a shaggy pony shared lawns without trampling flower beds. Even their droppings sat in tidy heaps. Near dusk, I carried sketch gear toward a studio and met a wild boar blocking the path. Huge, scarred, a white blaze over one eye. We stared until my arms tingled. When my box slipped, the boar grunted, leaned on the studio door, and nudged it open before lumbering off. The hinge never creaked. I told myself rural animals were clever and drew until lamplight blurred. Before bed, I spooned soup and leaned on the sill. Webs laced the window. Cream spiders worked in perfect unison, copying the carved maple leaf pattern of the frame. I raised my phone, then lowered it. Uneasy, outside, geese stood in the herb garden, not grazing, watching. 12 necks upright, eyes shining. When I moved, they didn't. Only after I exhaled did they pivot and waddle off, synchronized as soldiers. I slept on the sofa. The antique bed upstairs looked too perfectly made. At dawn, sunlight pierced shutters, and the front door gaped wide. Hoofprints the size of teacups crossed the slate floor, then stopped mid-stride. The pump groaned when I tried the tap, then flushed clear, cold and sweet. The spiders had finished their maple tapestry and begun a second layer, stitching new veins between the old. Breakfast on the patio tasted of dust. The animals formed a procession across the lawn. Goats, geese, pony, boar last. They encircled a cold fire pit, turned toward me, and waited. No sound rose except a dove's wing beat. When I blinked, the formation dissolved. They drifted away, grass untouched. I almost doubted it, until I saw what lay in the pit. A dead fox, limbs arranged like church silver. Afternoon dragged. I scrubbed counters, tried reading, failed. The pony whinnied 2 short notes, like a question. The glass reflected my face, and behind it, The boar. He stood where the fox had been, moonlight striping his muzzle. His eyes were darker than shadow, fixed on me with the weight of a judge. I blinked. He was against the French door, breath fogging the pain. Between us, the spider's new web quivered. I bolted upstairs and jammed a dresser against the door. Floorboards creaked below, slow and deliberate. Then hush, thick as water. Metal clinked. I had pocketed only one key. The rest lay on the hall table. Trying to stay sane, I crept to the barn at dusk. The padlock I'd seen earlier lay in the dust. Inside, every tool hung on outlines, blades oiled. Straw covered the floor in concentric rings, meeting at a mound where a black feather and thumb-sized iron bell rested. When I lifted the bell, the rings sagged inward with a sigh. The bell gave no sound, yet distant in the orchard, the pony answered with a mournful note. Driving up, I'd felt the landscape tilt. Hedgerows arched overhead like green tunnels, and my phone signal died miles from the postcode. For the last stretch, the sat-nav froze, yet each time I hesitated, a red kite swooped above the lane, guiding me until Terran House broke the tree line. Its slate tiles flashed like scales, and for a second, I imagined the building was breathing. Later, pacing the library for reception, I noticed dust on every shelf except one. A leather volume lay open to a woodcut of Saint Melengel, animals crowding at her feet. Someone had underlined a passage. The creatures answer only gentle hands. I closed the book, aware the cottage air smelled of fur and crushed nettles, not dust. Night fell fast. Wind died, crickets silenced, and my torch fizzled as I reached the cottage, batteries suddenly dead. The open doorway looked less like shelter than a throat. I stepped inside because the darkness behind felt worse. Hours crawled until gray dawn slid over the rafters. I pushed the dresser aside. The corridor was empty. Downstairs, the keys were gone. The French door yawned open, dew spotless beyond the threshold. I left with the window down, lungs gulping pine air until the cottage vanished behind trees. In the rearview mirror, a single goose stood in the lane, staring after me, wings folded like polite hands. Back in London, I still taste musk and soil. Sometimes my kettle whistle is answered by a low grunt no room could echo. Terran House was serene, harmonious, perfect. Yet every dream ends the same. The boar opens a door and waits for me to step through.